Hey, welcome to today's show. Today I'll be interviewing Dan Zavone, and he's going to give you his top 4 rules of how to prepare your student or students to learn in today's high-tech world of robotics and technology. Now, it must warn you, as the interview went on, the sunlight got on the lens of the camera, and please don't be distracted by that, but the film looks a little bit different, or maybe even arty as the film goes on. So hope you enjoyed today's interview. I'll be summarising at the end, giving you the notes. Head over to education2020.com to get today's show notes. I hope you enjoy. Okay, Dan. So we've got Dan Zavone, and he just recently took a group of kids to the States, and they first went to, was it Malaysia?
No, so the competition we're in is called FRC, which is First Robotics Competition. We had Australian qualifiers here, so lots of teams came from China and Taipei, Indonesia, Malaysia, all over the place to the Australian qualifiers that were down in Sydney. So we competed at 2 of those events down there. So they were the Asia Pacific qualifiers, if you like, for the World Championships where we ended up.
Okay, and what were the results of that championship?
Yeah, look, we finished, at the championship they break up into 6 divisions.
Yep.
Because it's quite a big event. We finished 26th in our division out of 71 teams.
Yep.
We're really happy with that. It's the first year we've competed in the competition, let alone gone to the World Championships.
Wow, year number 1.
Yeah, year number 1. And look, there's some problems with that in itself in terms of having so much success so quickly. It's sort of where to next. But look, we're really happy with where we finished. We were the highest ranked new team in our division,
Yep.
and we were the second highest ranked new team across the entire competition.
Okay.
So it's a pretty impressive result, I feel, for our team. Although, if you look at the end result of the team that won, we probably weren't competitive at that stage.
Okay. Yeah, right. So enough to take you to the World Championships in the US. Tell us about your experience over there.
Yeah, look, I think the main thing I would take away from that is on the final day of competition, when the winners were announced, we were in a baseball stadium in Houston in America, and you definitely get the feel that the world, this is how I felt, that we're in good position moving forward, like the brain power of the students that were there and the enthusiasm. It's hard to walk away from an event like that and feel like we can't solve all the world's problems that are in front of us. Now that may not be true, but that was the feeling that I got leaving it. And that's what I loved about the robotics event. The competition itself is fantastic. It's set up around a whole lot of themes like professional grace, cooperation, and all these other things. It's not just about building a robot. In fact, one of the slogans, if you like, of the competition is building more than just robots, building future engineers, or building student capacity.
That's cool.
And that is really what comes out of it, I think.
Yeah.
That's how I felt about the entire thing. It was very inspirational.
Yeah, as a teacher, that really speaks to me.
Yeah.
So you're receiving students into high school in year 7. Are there any kind of major skills you would see as ideal for students to have when they come to you?
Yeah, look, it's a really good question. I know we're sort of chatting about robotics at the moment. I would say that I don't necessarily see students coming to me in year 7 having lots of those robotic skills. And again, it is more than just robots. I see the things that robotics actually gives to them. So it gives them those opportunities to sit down and problem solve and be creative and work as a part of a team. They're the things I want my students to arrive with. They're not so tangible, because often it's hard. Like, we probably won't see that on a school report and won't be able to recognise that this student has come along, and other than maybe a comment, I get a feel, but that's the real capacity building in the students. I'd love my students to arrive and feel like they're inspired and ready to learn.
Right.
And some of them do. I think year 7 for students is a really exciting year, and mostly they do come with that. If they come with a set of skills around robotics, that's great if they've already had a little bit of inspiration there, but that's not the key for me. I look at primary school, I look at all of school and I go, how are our teachers inspiring those students to want to learn? How do I pick them up and I go, that's really exciting. I want to know more about that. I would say when I was in year 7, or even when I was in high school, I don't know that they were things I necessarily had as a student. I think there's a lot of expectations on students these days to do really good and big and creative things. I would say when I went through school, I didn't have that. I would say students I see coming through nowadays, I see more of that. I see them wanting to do bigger things, more than just learning content. They're interested and inspired by certain things and they want to pursue that. And that's one of the great things about our school, in a sense that I think we provide lots of opportunities for students to get in and do those types of things. There are community groups, there are other schools, there's a whole range of interesting stuff happening to engage those students. But for me, have the conditions been built that a student turns up to my class in year 7 where they're inspired and they want to learn and they can actually take that on a bit themselves rather than waiting for the teacher to arrive. Okay. It's kind of the key, I think, with year 7.
So keeping learning, being engaging, being visionary, seeing more that like what could I become rather than what do I have to do?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's common dialogue amongst teachers of high school. We look at the HSE and I think a lot of teachers have that conversation. It's just we're just teaching them stuff to pass an exam, and sometimes it feels a bit like that. I must admit, it's hard to keep that passion of students going in year 11 and 12 where it's just nose to the grindstone, learn that stuff. We've got this HSE. If we can foster students coming into high school to have a different mindset where it's bigger than just these are the things I have to learn, I feel that's the real key to teaching. I think the biggest key to teachers in school, I often think about this. If I've got a teacher that has this incredible skill set around knowing something, and I have one that builds amazing rapport with students, I would probably always take that one that builds the amazing rapport with students. They're the ones that are going to get those students inspired and learning. The person with the technical skills, that's great, but they're going to pick that up along the way anyway. We can give that to them in other ways. And in fact, we don't even need to give it all to them. If we build the right conditions, students will actually go and seek a lot of that themselves. This is the generation where they have access to everything, isn't it? And I guess I didn't have that going through, and I'm quite conscious of that students, if you inspire them to light the flame, they will go off and seek these things themselves and pursue it, as long as that spark is struck. Yeah.
What can I find out rather than what do I have to learn?
Yeah, and isn't that our move towards PBL, the project-based learning lots of schools are talking about? How do we give students authentic problems to solve where they actually feel like there's value in going out and pursuing those things themselves and finding information rather than us going, here's a textbook, study this stuff.
Yeah, totally. So for parents at home, is there anything that they could do to help or foster that love, or maybe some base skills that could just set them up for having that curious kind of nature?
Yeah, look, what a good question. I'm a parent of a Year 7 student this year, so I've probably got a bit more skin in the game thinking about that now. I would go back to the really foundational things, and then I'll come back and answer the question. I've always thought that if students can read, and if they can read well, that's, for them, that's opening the portal to be able to go and investigate and find things themselves.
Absolutely.
I'm conscious of that because I was a terrible reader at school. So I had remedial lessons all the way through primary school, and I was very weak. And I look at my children and I thought that's something I want to foster in them. From my own personal experience, I've found that students that can read well, that their world's kind of opened up. They've got an imagination in place, they pursue things themselves. That for me is one of the key foundational things that students need all the way through school. I know some people struggle with that for various reasons. As I said, I did for many years. I wouldn't have read my first full book independently until I was probably in year 8 at school.
Wow.
I look at my eldest who was doing it in kindergarten by himself. So I was at that lower level. In terms of what parents can do to foster that, I don't know, look, I look at this and think, you sound a bit like a dinosaur when you talk about some of these things, but some of those traditional values that we talk about, my parents, you sit down and you have the conversation. That's a really tricky one these days. I find I talk to lots of students who, they're attached to this. This is their life. It's their echo chamber.
We've got some more on that coming up. Stay tuned.
And we're tied into our devices, and we're communicating with other students through that. It's really hard. So look, I understand that's a part of life. It's a part of my life. But I think by having those conversations with students or your child at home about their homework, if they have homework, or about a task, that I find that you can lead them somewhere they may not have thought of. In class, a teacher, has a capacity of 30 students in a class. They can lead some of the classes to places, but that conversation for me is the key to getting students going. I can have a conversation about something that might be happening in science class. Go, have you thought about this? I'm not a science expert myself. Have you thought about this? And that kind of starts the path for them, and then I'll guide them to maybe investigate that. There's some really basic things I think about trying to do with my students. They're not always successful.
It's amazing how the basic things can turn out to be the main thing.
Yeah, look, it's hard to think about giving parenting advice. As I said, my eldest is in Year 7. I'm still kind of new in that aspect myself. But for me, that back to basics works well with him. I think my strategy would be a little bit different for my younger one. When he gets to that age, we still have those conversations, but I have to lead him more than my oldest one. He's 4 years ahead, so for him I can sort of set him off on a path and go, oh, good idea. But also he's a teenager. At times there's a bit of kickback and they don't want to do things. So it's, how do I put this in? Do you know one of the main things I've come across, and I spoke about this with a good friend the other day, is I think as students get older, teenagers, they find it hard to listen to advice from their parents. One of my good friends calls it a third-party recommendation. If I have a chat to one of my friends and say, well, can you talk to my oldest son about this? Then my son is very open to anything that he will say. Uncle Dave or whatever it is, Uncle Dave said this, and did you know this? And I could have told him that 5 minutes before, and he would have gone, that's not true, Dad. And as soon as someone else tells him it, it's off. And I think that's what teaching is about, isn't it?
Yeah.
Particularly once we get into high school, they've got lots of different teachers, those conversations start. All those teachers lead students somewhere. Yeah. And that's where it's a real community effort at schools to get students moving forward.
I'm going to write that one down for my kids when they get to high school. So what's the biggest enemy to developing these skills? Is there anything people should stop doing or push past to develop the skills that you want to see in the kids coming to you at their age?
Oh wow, that's a really big question. I'm a huge advocate of technology. I see so many good things in it. If you read documentation at the moment, I think, if we look at the head of Twitter and Google and Instagram, all of those parents are denying their children access to device time.
Wow.
And that's out there, it's well documented. They're saying that we see some issues around this. In my experience, if you let it go too long, if you don't set some really nice clear boundaries for students, and you're consistent in those, things can get away on you pretty easily. I'll give you an example. As a parent, I can have some absolutely crazy rules in my household, which might be, don't leave your forks and knives on the sink, they go in the dishwasher. And look, it's not that big a deal. It's 30 centimetres apart, I could do it easily. As long as my children know that I'm being consistent in that rule, then they will respond to that. It doesn't matter what the rule is, and I think that's the same with school as well. Lots of different teachers can have slightly different rules, but we need to make sure we're consistent in our application of that. So if I relate that back to my home, we get home from school, we sit down, and there's a time that's set aside that might be homework, and that homework might just be a conversation. And as painful as that is for the children at sometimes, devices down, we're actually going to talk. That's happening, and it's happening all the time, and I need to try to keep some consistency there as well. Look, technology can be a huge barrier. I don't think anyone has the answer at the moment in terms of saying this is how much time students should have, or what device is best, or how best to use it. I think as a generation we're probably working our way through it. That term digital native is bantered around. Maybe there's some truth to that students have grown up with using devices. I don't know if that's a pass out saying that we should let you use devices all the time. So that's one of the barriers that I actually see that can potentially get in the way. There are some other ones there. I look at some of our students that come through that struggle academically or struggle in a classroom setting. I think there are just times that we need to actually look at what programs work best for certain students. So again, if I go back to those literacy skills, if a student hasn't developed those good, strong literacy skills and they've been able to move forward and take some independence with their learning, if they haven't got that, then that should be our focus at that particular point in time. There's probably not much point in going, let's put a robotics program in place, let's put these special things in place if they haven't got some of those foundations. So there's some of the really tricky things that I think all parents will navigate. As a school we navigate, lots of schools are doing different things. I don't know, I'm a bit undecided on this at the moment.
Yep.
What that actually means, and I'm treading carefully with my own children, where no devices throughout the week. Does that mean I'll get a different result to a student that's been able to have it all the time? I'm not sure.
It's a great experiment that we're all involved in at the moment.
Yeah, and look, we're not sure as a generation at the moment. I know sometimes people have said to me things like, you have to let students use this, they have to learn it because it's going to be a big part of their life. And I still sort of go back to my experience. I finished school without virtually no computer use and went to university and just learned it all. It wasn't that hard. It's not that tricky to learn how to use an iPad or a computer. Has the world changed? Maybe it has. Maybe I'm a bit of a dinosaur in some of my thinking, but I'm unsure. I guess I can work with my experience that I know works well with my family, and in my classroom I know that this is a distraction until we need it. So I lock that down in each case.
Wow. Well, Dan Zavone, you have given us treasures of gold that we can think about. Look, how can we put that into our own parenting lives and teaching lives and lives of how we interact with everyone around us. So, thanks for coming on the show.
Pleasure.
Look out for Dan Zavone. He's got some good things coming out in the future.
Cheers.
Awesome. Okay, point number 1, above everything else, above having skills in robotics, above having skills in technology, Dan wants kids to arrive just enthusiastic and ready to learn. He thinks that primary school or teaching your child should be teaching them the basics in ways that are going to keep them hungry for learning, keeping them on what must I learn today to what can I find out today, and we're able to foster that curiosity for the world around us. He wants them to be problem solvers, creative thinkers and collaborative learners, able to work in an environment that's going to produce high productivity by working together to solve problems. You can do this by giving your students real life problems to solve, something that's actually relatable, not something that's stale and in a textbook, but something that's real, current and now, something that they'll have to fix in their ordinary day-to-day lives. Tip number 2, and this is golden, it's called the third party recommendation. It's where somebody else, another adult, sits down with your child and has a conversation about their learning and is able to nudge and guide them in the right direction of where to focus their learning. These people might be uncles, they might be aunties, they could be teachers, they could be neighbours, but having a chat with them and lining up what you would like them to have a chat with your child about can allow them to speak into their life the same things that you would, but your child would be able to receive that. He said that the teenage years is where this is most vital, to have that partner to work with in your child. Okay, tip number 3 is sitting down with your child at the end of the day and having an effective conversation that's going to discuss what they've learned that day or what they're learning that week or what they're learning on. By giving them that discussion, it allows them to have a feedback and gives them new direction. It involves you in their learning, and it sees that their learning is connected to the bigger world around them, not just themselves, not just their school, but it's connected to the world. I love this line. Dan is so quotable. He said that in the class or in a learning situation, technology is only a distraction until we actually need it. He said that technology is great, but we need clear and defined boundaries around how we use it and how we interact with it. This goes for both learning at school and at home as well. We need to set boundaries around our kids that they can later on implement and use in their life, so they're not going to be distracted in the world that's only ever going to be increasing in technological devices in our lives. Thanks for tuning in. Head over to education2020.com to get today's show notes. I hope you enjoy.